Oh man, we're back with another episode of Go FUD Yourself, and today
Oh my God, another episode?
Another one. Who would have thought?
I think
Today's
we're
my
at
favorite
160.
day of the week. It's Friday, and everybody loves a Friday, but it's FU Friday here on the pod. So we're big fans of that. Who are we talking about today, Ceara? And
We only have two major FUs, I guess three sort of. But we're going to talk about SBF, and then we're going to talk about the SEC and Gensler. I know that might feel limiting, but SBF is a lot because that trial is coming up. And SEC Gensler is like, it's kind of like we report on it every day. So it's become really blasé. And I actually want to draw attention to how ridiculous it is.
I like it. Let's do it. All right. Quick reminder to everybody, we're a live show Monday to Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern.
Okay.
We also don't commercialize this thing. So help us spread the word and spread the love. We don't spend money on ads or any of that crap. So like, share, subscribe, and bookmark us on Twitter if you don't mind. We're on all the major venues. I'm not wearing merch today. So today, just a quick shout out to Lululemon for this. It's a nice.
Did you see that they just joined forces with Peloton? So Lululemon has to stop their mirror workout things.
Really?
Yeah, like this morning. Big deal. Big deal in the wellness world.
I did not see that. But last time I was in a Lulu store, I was looking at that mirror thing and I was like, yeah, this looks a lot like Peloton. And there's another version. Peloton has a mirror, actually, I think that does that too. Anyways, we digress. As usual. All right. Come on, Brain. All right, we're gonna play our little fancy.
Which video are you gonna pick? You have so many options now.
I know. That's a problem. Options for me is a problem. All right, let's freaking go. Oh man.
Yeah.
I love that video. I like the punk rock one too, but I just wanted to mess with you because I knew you were trying to see which one I'd play. All right.
I figured you'd pick that one. It's your favorite. It's always been your favorite. And it is chill, right?
It's like kind of like,
yeah.
You know,
it makes sure that we're not too hyper when we start.
Yeah, we need everything we can get. I'm usually about 8 coffees in at this point in the day, so we're good to go. Okay.
Before we really start on this,
yeah.
This might be too much of a rabbit hole, so feel free to just not. But do you have any reason to say F you to Trudeau today?
Is there a day that goes by that we don't have a reason to say F you to Trudeau?
The whole Nazi thing is really still going on in the news here. And I was wondering if that mattered in Florida. Like, is it in the news there? No, okay.
No.
It's huge here. Because Paul Rudd or like some Chris Schneider started making public apologies for things like having dated Canadians.
Like, Canada has lost their collective mind, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's wild.
Politically, it's out of fucking control. And I mean, so there's a constant debate here in the US about whether we should stay with a two-party system or consider, multi-party type structure. And Canada is evidence of why that is a bad freaking idea, in my opinion. The British parliamentary system, I think, leaves a lot to be desired because very rarely does any party ever have meaningful popular majority.
That's right.
Often it's called first past the post. So like you could have 30% of the vote and still win. And then you have a minority government, and then you got to partner with another.
Which I like personally.
I don't mind the partnering. The problem is often it's the smallest minorities that have the most outsized influence. And so again,
sorry, I wanted to be clear. It's not the partnering that I like. It's the minority government because it ensures that the decisions people are making are challenged and well thought out and researched, and that they have to actually convince other people to do them, as opposed to just like making blanket choices.
Pushing stuff through. Yeah. The downside with that, though, is often you get a lot of these special interests from your, and that's how in Canada, at least over the last 8, arguably 12 years with liberal governments, I mean, there's been a lot of special interests that have now become commonplace. And that's where this like critical race theory in all the schools happens and is acceptable. The transing the kids across the nation is acceptable. Like a lot of this kind of fairly...
That one's a little bit weird. I just want to say, I know that you and I don't totally agree on all of these things, but I'm really active I don't want to say active politically. I don't go and like campaign or something like that, but I make sure that I actually read what's going on. And if something new comes out, I look at it myself and I try to have critical thought about it. And so when the latest Alberta school reform came out, I actually read quite a bit of the curriculum that had come out. And a lot of the things that were like, that people are protesting against right now aren't actually in the curriculum. It's just like choices that the schools are making. So that's kind of another weird, Anyway. I was just wondering about the Trudeau thing. I was wondering about the Nazis because it seems like really big here.
Well, my belief on that whole thing is like, well, anyways, we can go deep down into this thing. Maybe we should.
You want to finish? Do you want to say your belief? Like, I'm happy to.
No, like I just think, in my opinion, it's not about whether it's like, in my opinion, it should be unacceptable. Period. Like it's not like, oh, well, it's not officially in every curriculum, but it happens and we don't do anything about it. I think like, fine. If you want to be trans and all that shit, I'm totally fine with that once you're an adult. I'm not fine with it, but I can accept it when you're an adult. But when you're kids, like we should never, ever, ever in society affirm delusion, affirm mental illness, in my opinion. And anyways, this is probably going to be the episode that goes viral because I say something stupid that everybody wants to latch onto, but it's all good. Anyways, I just think we need to give our collective heads a shake. Every single major government right now is in so much trouble because of significant overspending, and there's no end in sight. Like they're fighting right now over increases to spending in the US. Like, we're already at a $2 trillion deficit. What in the fuck are we talking about additional spending?
Right. This is interesting because there are things that I don't agree with that you say, you know, especially when we talk about LGBTQ and that kind of thing. And JD and I have a good relationship where we can actually talk about it, and we only scream and hang up like after 20 minutes or so, which is why Go FUD Yourself is so good because we don't always agree, right? And we're happy to have the conversation, and neither of us are likely going to be convinced from our personal podiums, but at least we can have those conversations and give you different ideas about what's going on. But what I do get caught up on, similar to you, I think, is that like we have bigger problems right now. We have huge problems like the wild overfishing, and like Edmonton, where I live, is not recession proof, and you can see it in the streets and around.
Not even close.
Yeah, but like it's wild, right? And so we have this major recession now, and I mean, I don't want to say that's worldwide. I don't want to be naive about it, but like inflation is wild, overspending is wild. And like, I don't see anybody coming in with plans to fix that. Instead, I do see a lot of tabloids distracting from it, right?
Yeah. I mean, again, regardless of how we feel about some of these social issues, in my opinion, they should be second to so many of the pressing, real, in your face, affects everybody type stuff. Like obviously inflation, like the economy, like the war in Ukraine and Russia that could potentially turn into some nuclear, conflict somehow, like hopefully not, but obviously China, Taiwan, like we've got a lot of global issues that we need to like maybe take a step back and try to figure out. And energy independence, energy security, like that's a real problem now. Anyways, there's a lot of things that we should be focused on.
Energy security. Jeez.
Well, yeah, that's another problem with why Trudeau needs to take a freaking hike, because he's single-handedly crushing the Canadian energy industry.
Yeah, it's actually obscene. There's ads right now in Alberta, this is real, that are just black billboards that say no to blackouts, and then have a Government of Alberta like petition link. Because okay, so basically Danielle Smith said that we weren't doing any new energy projects, right? I think you're familiar with that. And then then the new things that came out is that they're not backing any oil projects anymore, which basically means that like, all of our homes are now defunct. So and so in more northern areas, if it's a place that's run primarily off diesel, or if they have limited natural gas or something like that, they have rolling blackouts in the towns. And so it was said really tongue in cheek that might end up happening in Alberta, and that's now being clung to as a narrative. Anyway, I'm always curious about what you feel about Canada.
It's mind blowing, honestly. Like to be one of the most rich resource producing countries in the world, second only to I think Saudi and the US.
We're lower down now. I looked into it about a month ago.
Now, of course,
we're like seventh or something. Yeah,
because they keep turning off new developments and like, I mean, we can all have an opinion on global warming and climate change and all of that shit. Obviously, I am pretty firmly in one camp on that. But let's assume that we think climate change is a real problem. I mean, let's assume that we can all agree that there's some climate change problem. I don't think that, but let's assume that we can. Yeah. It doesn't make sense to me that we put these blanket policies in the Western world, yet we still all use oil that's coming from other areas of the world. We just, what is it, like virtue signaling that we don't produce it here, but instead we pay more money and have way worse impacts in China or Saudi on the environment than we ever would in North America. Like, there will be a point in time. Should we get off fossil fuels eventually, in my opinion? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we all know that there is some impact to the environment and it's probably not good. But at the same time, I mean, we have to do it in a smart way that doesn't completely crush our economies and put us in a really peculiar situation from a geopolitical standpoint. And both the US and Canadian governments have completely and utterly screwed that up, in my opinion.
I don't know if you've seen this, but there's a new law that came in different counties in British Columbia, where if you have new builds, there's no natural gas allowed to be run to them.
Why? It's like the cheapest, cleanest form of energy.
Yeah. They want heat pumps, and they are, actually, this was a Biden thing too. They want to have no gas stoves by a certain year.
Yeah, that's nonsense. Like, that'll never.
I was like, oh, is that the fight you decided to pick here? Like, okay. All right.
So that's what we're concerned about. Not like, I'm like, all the problems we have, natural gas stoves. Like, is that
all right. I just want to get you in the mood for FU Friday. I thought I'd just bring up something I know you hate, as in Canada politics.
Now I'm really in the mood. Yeah, I mean, a lot of this policy is just obnoxious. Like, I feel like they looked at all of the things that use natural resources. Let's find one that has zero lobby in the US, yeah. And that's the stove industry. They don't have much of a lobby. And so they just said, we're just going to outlaw gas stoves pretty soon, even though they're orders of magnitude more efficient than an electric stove in terms of total energy consumption and impact on the environment. Like, come on.
Well, since we're talking about regulation, do you want to start with the SEC?
No.
Oh, you want to start with SBF?
To talk about SBF, yeah.
Okay. Okay, let me give a little bit of background, because although crypto natives know exactly what's happening with SBF, people like my mom, who sometimes watch, might not know. So Sam Bankman-Fried, who's also known as SBF, was the founder of FTX. FTX was a huge crypto exchange. It was a centralized crypto exchange. And it was it November last year?
Yeah.
FTX collapsed, and Alameda Research also imploded. There's been this ongoing...
Mainly because they were all built on false bullshit. But
their collapse was about $32 billion with a $10 billion deficit left after all is said and done so far. The SBF trial is actually going to start on October 4th, and they're selecting their jury on October 3rd. So this is really coming up. And SBF is facing up to 115 years in jail. I don't know if this is going to be real jail or like celebrity jail, but there are 7 different charges. So there's wire fraud, conspiracy, securities fraud, commodities fraud, money laundering. The trial, they say, could last up to 6 weeks. I think it could be longer than that, just based on how long it's all been so far.
Yeah, the thing here, like, often we would think, oh, he's never going to get the max. In this particular case, I think they're trying to make, they will be trying, if he's found guilty, they will be trying to make an example. The closest comparison is Madoff, Bernie Madoff, and he received a legitimate jail sentence.
Yes.
And I suspect SBF will too, unless he can somehow prove complete ignorance and incompetence. But
which I don't know is going to be possible now. But people, so other experts, not just JD expert and Ceara expert, but real experts are also saying that he is likely to be made an example of, and he will likely face the full 115 years. It also, there's theories about the legal scrutiny and how this could set precedent for other centralized exchanges as the SEC continues to regulate. Also, though, I just want to note that it's really, really dramatic. Like, this is crypto tabloid news all day long.
So I was at a Arrington event earlier in this week. That's why I missed Tuesday on the pod. And that was one of the things actually that was a topic of conversation at this event, was the narrative surrounding FTX and the upcoming lawsuit. whether we like it or not, is going to dominate the headlines with respect to crypto. And so a lot of people were hoping for kind of a crazy rush to the end of the year of crypto adoption and some excitement. We're going to have some serious and significant headwinds, I think, just from a narrative perspective. Hopefully this trial doesn't last forever. I'm actually impressed that the trial started within a year of the actual
I'm amazed.
events.
And the idea that it'll be done within 6 weeks means before 2024. What a Christmas gift to us all.
Yeah. I mean, part of me, I have empathy for anybody in the position of SBF because I do, like, yes, he deserves everything that he's about to get, in my opinion, because it was fraudulent and nefarious at best, in my opinion. But the flip side of that is often it's naivete that gets people in that situation. And then once you're there,
young?
Yeah, he's super young. He's under 30. And once you're in that situation, then it becomes shit. How do we unwind this? And so for all of these scenarios, there comes a point in time where, like, an inflection point, if you look back, and I don't know what it is yet for FTX, but most of these situations, there was a point in time that they crossed the path of no return, the point of no return. And I mean, they had, in my opinion, ample opportunities to say, shit, we fucked up here. Let's unwind this. Let's deal with it. But instead, and often what happens is you try to push your way out of the problem and inadvertently make it worse. So I think that's kind of what happened here. It was, oh shit, 6 months before the collapse, 12 months before the collapse, Terra Luna happened, 9 months, 8 months. And that was actually what caused FTX to have massive holes in the balance sheet. And then they spent the next 8 months trying to fucking manipulate it and get themselves out of the problem. And it just made it worse. And so that's, kind of how it ended up where we're at now. So part of me feels slightly empathetic for SBF because this has got to be overwhelming, right? Like, I mean, he went from being on top of the world, 30 under 30, billionaire, philanthropist, blah, blah, blah. Everybody loved him. He was the darling of America, really. Sponsoring Formula One, Formula One teams.
Shaquille O'Neal,
they just were throwing money around, buying, anyways. So he went from like one extreme to now like house arrest, then got his bail revoked because he's an idiot. And like, to me, again, this just seems.
So what also doesn't look good for him, just in terms of the sentencing, is that a lot of those from his inner circle have already pled guilty to fraud, like they've had plea deals. And so probably, from what I've read, only if he's found to be a conspirator, only if he's found to have been actively planning this, will he get the 115 years. But the shortest sentence I've seen anyone predict is 10 years. And likely, even if he doesn't get the conspiracy one, he'll still get money laundering, fraud, etc. And so he'll probably still be in jail for the rest of his life.
Or at least
some form of jail, right? Some form of harm.
The bulk of his life. Which sucks. Like, I hate even talking about someone's life like it's disposable. But at the same time, the amount of people impacted by those decisions is mind-blowing. There's millions of creditors of FTX. We're one of them. And so, although I feel kind of crappy for the situation that SBF finds himself in, just from an empathetic perspective, it's such a negative impact on the space, on so many people. There's a lot of people that literally lost their life savings.
Absolutely.
I mean,
I have a really genuine question about this that I thought you might be able to give some insight to, but not financial advice. Sure. So as you said, Terra collapsed, and that left these giant holes in FTX's balance sheets.
Yeah.
Is there anything that they could have done to stay in good graces? Like, should they have just gone bankrupt? Was there a way for them to actually make money back without stealing money? What were they kind of looking at?
I think it was probably pretty bad at that point. Now, of course, I don't know with certainty. Everything that I know about the collapse of FTX is anecdotal. Some of it comes from fairly trustworthy resources, but I don't know. So if I had to speculate, I would think that they were probably abundantly aware of how shitty the situation was at the time. And it would not have been simple to deal with at that point in time either, but it would have been orders of magnitude less problematic, I think, because what happened was they tried to refinance a bunch of loans and they made fraudulent statements about collateral. They took outsized risk. It's kind of like the gambling addict that uses rent.
Right.
You know, I hate to use that parallel because it's not gambling. Well, I mean, some might argue that it is gambling, but anyways, would it have been problematic? Sure. Like I think they would have been in a pretty serious situation, but I think more of the fraudulent activity piled on trying to put a Band-Aid on the hole in the boat than otherwise would have. So I don't know. Who knows? But I think always, I mean, the advice that I will give from an entrepreneur to other potential entrepreneurs is, you know, if you're looking at something and you're going, shit, like we're in a pretty bad spot here, that usually should be your sign that you need to take a step back, talk to your attorneys, talk to your accountants, and be like, hey, we found ourselves in this predicament. What do we do here? Like, we want to make our users as whole as possible. We don't want to end up in trouble. Like if they would have went to regulators, like even bankruptcy itself, if you've made a series of poor decisions, as long as they're not fraudulent and deceiving, is not like, you don't go to jail for going bankrupt. It sucks, but
that's not fun.
like there's a lot better ways that this could have been handled, I think, than I know than what they did. And I think they would be finding themselves in a lot less trouble.
Sometimes I wonder, because he is so young, how much of this was his personal ego thinking that he could fix it for everybody versus like poor mentorship. You know, like, did he have a reasonable mentor to talk to?
I have no idea. Like his parents were super connected, of course. And
just an interesting thought. I don't know.
Yeah. It's an interesting one because like part of you wants to say, well, I mean, he's young, right? But there's a lot of young entrepreneurs that do incredible things and don't steal money. So it's
right.
You don't want to handicap everybody that's young, in the sense that they're not capable of running a business. Right. So I mean, that's probably part of it. There's some immaturity. There's some ego, most likely. I mean, he went from 0 to a billionaire in less than a year, about a year. So I mean, there's a lot of things that factored in to how this happened. I think it went from small company of a few guys, you know, working 24 hours a day, trading shit coins, to this like massive, you know, multiple hundreds of millions of dollars flying in every direction. All these acquisitions, they were starting to try to acquire companies at the end that they owed money to try to help obfuscate a lot of the bad debts and all this other shit. Like it was just they're collateralizing the FTT token, which effectively had zero value. Like they just did a whole bunch of stuff that really, in an attempt to try to fix the problem, made it so much worse. And again, like it's easy for me to say sitting on the outside, obviously, like when you realize that you should have taken a step back and done the right thing. Yeah, of course, that's easy to say as an armchair quarterback. Being in the thick of it, I'm sure to his defense, he probably had some advice internally from people that were saying, yeah, well, we can just do this and it should work. You know what I mean? Like I doubt that it was entirely malicious where they're like, fuck this, we're going to do a bunch of fraudulent stuff and hope we get away with it. They were probably thinking it's pretty high probability going to work, but it didn't.
Yeah, well, that's not what the SEC thinks.
Yeah, I mean, and it doesn't, again, it's even if it wasn't malicious, I think there was a consciousness around it. Like they weren't saying, let's purposely fuck people over, but I think there was a consciousness around knowing they were doing the wrong thing, but thinking that it was going to work, if that makes sense.
Do you have a big FU for SBF or FTX?
Yeah, a big FU to SBF. Once I get paid back, my FU might not be as big, but today, FU.
For now.
FU, Mr. SBF. All right, let's move on to my other favorite personality.
So basically, on September 27th, there was a committee hearing on the oversight of the Securities and Exchange Committee. Exciting, so many committee words. Commission. Yes, thank you. It says I was reading, I messed up too many lines because there was also a House Financial Services Committee oversight on the same page. Anyway, that was on September 27th. If you want to actually watch Gensler talk, it is on YouTube because these are public. They are typically information gathering sessions. Usually decisions aren't made actively while they are there. But if you do want to watch it yourself, you're welcome to. More people than just Gary talked, of course, Mr. Gensler, Mr. Burns. But basically, there is a lot of scrutiny and a lot of bipartisan criticism because he is being accused of kneecapping the entire crypto industry and kneecapping really any innovations that might be coming out that could impact any sort of financial services. We talked about AI a bit earlier today. Before we get too far into this, I just want to say that Representative Andy Barr called him Tanya Harding for his kneecapping, which is
kind of funny, kind of crazy. There's a few of them that were on the committees that actually asked for Gensler to step down and remove himself from the process, because the thing is like, whether you're completely of the opinion that Gensler is messing shit up here, it's going to be near impossible for him to walk back that perception from most people. No matter what he does now, there's going to be a fairly strong camp thinking that he's doing it to sabotage the space. And whether that's entirely true or not, I guess remains to be seen. But perception is pretty important. And right now, perception of the SEC in general, specifically with its activity towards crypto, is incredibly negative. And I mean, there's one thing, there's a lot to be said about consumer protection. I've been a very vocal advocate of this for the last few years in crypto, that there is no future, in my opinion. There's no scaled future without much greater consumer protection, because as a society, that's what we're used to. That's what we expect. And so do I think that it's the best possible outcome to continue to have a nanny state? No. But that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I think the best possible outcome is. It's what's most likely to happen given status quo, and that is better consumer protection. So I get that. I get the desire for that. And Gary, to his defense, which I don't do often, it is in fact, that's a big piece of his narrative around this, is consumer protection, right? And so I think, at least superficially, he's, we're all trying to optimize for the same outcome, better consumer protection. I just think the tact over the last year in particular, since FTX, has been very difficult to accept. It seems now that there was no regulation, an absence of people that really gave a shit about it until everything went south. And now it's like, it's over enforcement. It's like really broad blanket application of arguably different rules. I mean, some people are going to argue that the rules should apply. Some people argue that they shouldn't because they're different. Anyways, all of this to say, I'm going on a tangent here, but all this to say, I think nobody in America thinks that we've handled this appropriately from a regulatory perspective. Right. And for that reason, the person that was at the helm of the ship for the entirety of that process, it's no wonder people aren't trusting that he's going to figure it out. So, we
did speak earlier this week about some of that bipartisan push to reconsider the spot Bitcoin ETFs and other ETFs. But the one thing that maybe came out of this hearing that I have found in the news is that Gensler has agreed that Bitcoin is not a security, but he hasn't quite said that it's a commodity. It's pretty clear that that's the direction that that's the case that he's trying to build, but he hasn't actually used the term commodity yet.
Yeah, I mean, that would take jurisdiction away from him. So he's probably not going to use that term because it's going to go to the CFTC, which they stand to create a lot of revenue. The regulatory capture for crypto, same as it is for finance, generally is incredibly high. Right. So everybody wants their pound of fat there, and Gensler in particular. Like if you just look at even the rulings or some of the fines that they've put out, like we're talking tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. That funds the entire department, obviously, and they can get bigger, and it's typical government. They want to do whatever they can to get bigger. And anyways, There's some activity that needs to happen. Some movement needs to happen in this regard. There was some speculation that because there's a pending government shutdown, which doesn't look like there's a solution to at midnight tomorrow, that they were going to try to get something done before the shutdown. But I suspect if they rush a decision from the SEC, it's just going to be either flat out decline or denial, or they're just going to push it. I think they're just going to push it to next year.
Yeah.
We shall see. All right. Well,
you want to say FU to the SEC or what?
Well, mainly to Gensler. I think there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people in the SEC that I think have a really positive understanding and approach to the space. I just think it's overshadowed by one particular personality that is very public, very vocal, and very politically motivated at the moment. And so for that reason, I don't want to say FU to the SEC, but rather just Gary Gensler. So today, Mr. Burns, FU.
All right.
And that's it. With that, everybody have a great weekend. Go touch some grass, do some fun shit. We'll be here on Monday. We got you covered. All the news roundup over the weekend. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it on Monday. So yeah.
Like, share, subscribe on every possible place you can.
Holy shit.
Yeah, you missed it, JD. I need you to.
You did it without me. Oh.
Faces.
With that, I say to you, Ceara, have a great weekend and go find yourself.
Go find